Hi all, I wanted to introduce today's speaker, Gareth Bradley, as well as the topic itself. This is a pretty exciting topic for me because engaging in customers and employees around customer experience and improving the customer experience is fundamentally what most companies are attempting to do today. Gareth, I'll say the nice things about him because he won't. Gareth has a tremendous background. He has worked in product and service delivery for years and has been heading up Spigit's product management role for over a year and has had a tremendous impact on the future of roadmap of the company. Let's talk a little bit about the agenda today. We're going to discuss, Gareth is going to dive deep on how voice of the customer is done today, and we thought we might make it interesting by talking about how voice of the customer can be done in B2C versus B2B, because people often think of, when they think about voice of the customer, they think about just the B2C side of things, but we thought we'd add in a little flavor around B2B as well. And introducing Spigit, for those on the call who are not familiar with us, we are the largest and leading player in the innovation management space, and what we do is we enable companies to tap into their employees, their partners, and customers to solve business issues. And that can be anything from customer experience to cost improvement. Get into that in a second. And we're proud to work with some of the largest companies in the world today. Next slide. Forrester and Gartner recognize Spigit as a leader in innovation management. We're very proud of that. And what people use today for Spigit is they use this in 4 specific areas before we get over to Gareth. They use us to help reduce customer churn. They use us to slash costs and waste or improve processes, to discover new products, and finally, and most importantly, to build a culture of innovation at the company. So to the next slide, the current voice of the customer approach. And over to you, Gareth. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Amy. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. So let's start today by taking a look at the current approach, the current accepted approach for VOC, voice of the customer programs. If you could click through to the next slide. So I open up with a quote from Gartner. Gartner, a very respected organization, are telling us that 95% of those that they do survey are now engaged or are planning to engage the voice of the customer, the voice of their customer. And that's a really interesting statistic. That tells us that this is really, firstly, prevalent out there in the marketplace, that everyone's trying to do something. Everybody realizes the importance of gauging and gaining insight from voice of the customer programs. But also, it gives us a question to answer, and I think that's a question we're going to try to tackle today in the webinar. The next slide. So let's take a look at today's VOC approach, and I like to think of this as both an appraisal of the current approach, but also identifying some gaps as well. So currently, if we take a look at the standard techniques, it's very much a one-way feedback loop. There's no kind of counter to it. You gain the insight from the customer and it kind of locks in. You take it away, you work on it. This can often lead to identification of the problem, but not really the solution. The customer is in a kind of passive state. They'll tell you why they have a problem, why there's an issue, but they're not really offering up a solution, and that can lead to problems when you're in product development, when you're in service development. And you can start to miss the forest for the trees. It can give you the wrong kinds of problem, and then when you go into solution mode, that really does sort of spiral out of control. It has a real risk around it. So what we're going to look at today is how we can engage those groups, how we can work with people differently to solve the issue, to solve the problems, and to correct the customer journey, to improve the customer journey for both employees and our customers. Next slide. So before we get really into the nitty-gritty here, I'd like to just pose a poll, and we want to understand if you regularly work with customers or large numbers of people to identify and solve customer experience issues. Wow. So those numbers are pretty high. 72% of you telling us that you actually are out there working with customers now, looking to solve those problems. So I think that's a great measure of the crowd today on the call, and it certainly verifies what we're thinking or what we're seeing here at Spigit. So let's take that now and move back to our presentation and our webinar today, because I want to actually walk through some examples, and we're going to start with the B2C approach. I think this is probably the most common approach, as Amy mentioned earlier on, that the companies are taking. Organizations, non-for-profits as well. It's easier to do. There's some tried and trusted techniques, and really we want to get into this. We want to take a look at maybe how we can start to change the game in a B2C environment. So if we can click through to the next slide. Really the question I'm posing is, what if there was a different way to get that feedback at scale? And we see two primary areas of this. And the first one is a time-bound challenge, something that's online. It's a focused topic, a focused question. It's a direct link to a business goal. A time-bound challenge is very different. It can garner focus and support from the customer, from the end users of your products and services, and it really does bring them into a different line of thinking. They're being asked something that's much more structured. It's not a survey. There is an element, because it's online, of collaboration, and that gives you a different sample point. It starts to move away from the problem identification, and through the collaboration elements, it brings in that notion of solution. In terms of a time-bound challenge, if you're wondering what that might be, obviously it's going to be a start and an end date, a temporal dynamic, if you like. And we know from our work here at Spigit that they work very, very well, engaging any kind of crowd. Those temporal dynamics really drive through human behavior, and they get the best out of a crowd in short, sharp bursts. Counter to that, there is this notion of an always-on space, somewhere where we can bring our customers and we can sort of cultivate the community on an ongoing basis. This can be focused around your business process changes, continuous improvement that you're trying to bring into call center or frontline operations. This is customer-led at the end of the day. This is something that will come from customers, and it will bleed through into your frontline staff. They'll all be aware of it. The always-on community is a great way to have that perpetual place to submit your suggestion, to bring in the suggestion box mentality that I can, sure, submit my idea, but the difference here, being online, is that now I'm in a two-way conversation, even with my own employer. So harnessing that voice and stretching beyond your own people into the crowd, the people they deal with day to day, there's two ways to get that feedback from scale: time-bound and always on. So let's now take a look at some examples. I think that's always useful to paint some color onto the canvas. So if you can click to the next slide, please. We're going to start with AT&T, a brand that hopefully everybody's familiar with. AT&T are a long-term engager of the crowd, and if we take some examples here, they've been very, very prominent in engaging their own employees to understand the consumer problem, to understand the user journey. So here on the screen at the moment, we have Siobhan, and Siobhan was working in a call center in Detroit, and she had a personal experience outside of work which related to driving and texting. Now, she had access to a Voice of the Customer program, albeit directed through her to the customers that she sees and the experiences she has as a consumer herself. She took her idea of eradicating texting while driving, and she placed the idea into the system. She collaborated with peers and people around her from the call center, from other parts of AT&T, to collaborate and drive through a new product. And this new product was the drive mode. The drive mode is something that encourages people to, just like airline mode or airplane mode, to switch on drive mode on their phone and to stop those texts distracting you whilst you're driving. That's sourced from a consumer experience through your own employees and brought back into a central innovation function. That's really a powerful story if we're looking to identify ways in which mass collaboration can really start to work. The story itself here attracted thousands of comments, tens of thousands of ratings. It pushed through the innovation pipeline like no other idea had before. And that's all because the foundry and the foundation was in place. to take those ideas from the customer or the consumer, bring them through the front line, and harness that power back into your central functions. So let's continue with AT&T and take a look at the next slide. AT&T have been pretty prominent in cultivating this evergreen program that's called the TIP program. They tap into that collective intelligence of the employee base. So again, looking at their employees as not just numbers and people who are employed under the AT&T banner, but also as consumers, people who deal with consumers, people whose job it is to interact with them daily, and taking those experiences from the employee base into those central functions and driving through a program of excellence and innovation that really is harnessing the crowd. It's doing that legwork for you. It's bringing in the power with minimal effort from central functions. The crowd are doing this, the employees are doing this themselves organically. So let's take a look at some numbers maybe from AT&T in our next slide. So this TIP program that I'm referencing, it's actually driven through, over the course of its lifetime, over 75 patents in a single year. That's harnessed from the crowd, the internal crowd, listening to consumers, bringing their consumer experience themselves into AT&T. There's currently 75 firm product projects in development and a 10x return on the investment. Just to take those numbers alone and think about how that impacts a VOC program, it's a bit of a game changer for me. That's something that as an owner of a program myself, I often look at. It's almost hot wiring or speeding up your process by getting to the people who know the problems quicker. So AT&T, great case study, a great example of harnessing that internal B2C approach. If you can click to the next slide, please. Let's now take a look at a not-for-profit, the UNHCR, the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. The UNHCR has a goal, a clear mandate set down, where they are now looking to embrace, through an innovation approach, the power of the crowd in a B2C environment, but not your traditional B2C environment, as you'll see as we move through. So we can click to the next slide, please. So UNHCR, they have a very open platform. It's out there to the public, and they focus challenges, those time-bound challenges, different opportunities they see to affect and improve the lives of refugees. One such challenge that they ran was around creating a better educational opportunity for those displaced children and their families. Anyone who follows the news, current affairs, you'll know that there's a huge migration of refugees across Europe at the moment and in many other areas across the world. What UNHCR did was they tapped in to this knowledge they have, the people they work with, to drive through innovation, a real improvement, and not your traditional innovation with a dollar amount. This is actually affecting people's lives. It's tapping into those areas. So the challenge is clear, improving the educational opportunities for those children and families. But now, how do they actually do it? Let's think about, that's the problem. How do we move now to the solution? So UNHCR solution was to harness the platform they had to push out this time-bound challenge, to focus people on the specific question. But in terms of the solution, they're looking to gather input from the C element here, and that is very much the crowd, the NGOs, the people on the ground that they work with across the world. This is collecting ideas towards this focused goal from partners' refugee camps in over 126 countries in the world, in some of the most hard to help or most difficult environments you can imagine. People are coming up, innovating, coming up with ideas, innovating on the ground, putting them in place locally. But really, the sweet spot here is understanding that local implementation could be taken and rolled out across the world. That's what UNHCR Ideas is trying to solve. So they leveraged the mobile technology. They distributed tablets through to refugees. They're preloading those tablets with existing language learning applications for more self-styled classroom study. That was the outcome of the challenge, and that was brought together, as I say, by this really diverse crowd, this global crowd, a mobilized crowd, who understood the problem. They were being tapped into through a B2C channel. If you like, they were the consumer. But it gives an organization such as UNHCR a real I guess, unquantifiable benefit here, that they are able to hotwire the route to improving the lives of the refugees they deal with day to day. And that is something globally that they can roll out across the globe with different challenges each month. On the right-hand side of the page, actually, you'll see a couple of challenges that are up there now, the environment challenge and the recruitment challenge. Interestingly, UNHCR haven't stopped. They haven't stopped with let's solve some challenges for refugees and improve their lives. They're looking to recruit through their B2C channel as well. So would you like to sponsor a challenge? Would you like to get involved in the program? That's all through the same channel. So when people arrive here, they're not just bringing them into one time-bound and focused challenge. They're giving them more things to do, more ways to engage with UNHCR and to improve the lives of those children. I think that's a really, really powerful story, and hopefully something you'll all look at and think differently about the B2C relationship. But obviously B2C is something that's heavily used out there. Maybe it's time to take a look at how we can bring B2B into play here. So if you can click to the next slide, please. What we'd like to cover in this section is changing the face of B2B relationships with VOC. So how are we going to leverage our existing partners, the people we work with, to drive through voice of the customer improvements? Not many people tap into this. This is almost that area of the program that gets forgotten about, because people do want to get, and program owners want to get out to the customer, to the consumer. So let's take a look. If we can click into the next slide, please. As we mentioned earlier on, and Amy was talking about this right at the top of the webinar, there's 4 really important ways in which I see the opportunity to engage the B2B audience, to reduce your own customer churn. Partners, they understand it, they may sell your products, they understand the customer problem. It might be to cut costs and waste. Again, supply chain, in oil and gas, in manufacturing industries, understanding where problems occur and helping you to eradicate the waste in that pipeline. It could also be for discovery of new products, co-creation with your partners, with other wings or other brands within your overall organization. And finally, it could be, when all of this is stripped away, an opportunity to build a culture of innovation. So using a different playbook, identifying different methodologies to supplement your B2C approach. This could be where B2B really does change the game for you. So let's take a look at some examples now as we move through the slides. And the first one I wanted to talk about really was Siemens. Siemens have clearly understood this. They've run a series of time-bound challenges across the globe. So that's an important thing to understand around scale. And they've worked with both their internal employees, the contact centers, the people who handle those calls coming in around their services and their products. They've worked with them. They've worked with their partners. They've worked with educational organizations all around the world. And that's really something I want to press across here during the webinar, that this isn't just a case of working with partners, although that's a very successful way to do this, but this could also be hammering into that call center mentality, getting to those people and understanding what they see, again, like we covered in B2C, that could start to change product development or could start to change the supply chain within the company. So let's click through to the next example. So Siemens, what were they doing? I guess that might be a key question for you all. Well, they actually focused this down to begin with on reducing the product time to market, improving their manufacturing flexibility and their efficiency at the same time. Now, that's a really big challenge. You can get answers to that challenge, solutions to that challenge from many different areas. You can also identify problems. So Siemens decided that the way to change the game for them, to move away from the tried and trusted approaches they've had in the past, was to go out and go public. They used the platform to recruit tech partners for digital manufacturing, and this was wildly successful. During the ramp up and the rollout of this program, they were understanding that this really is the replacement for that manual technology scouting in their emerging and key markets. This gave them, from a central point, access to everybody, to those markets where they maybe haven't understood the market problem before. This is the game changer for them. Understanding what's the horizon in the subcontinent of Asia, what's the horizon in APAC, what's the horizon in Africa, what do we need to be thinking about to improve our market and our product time to market, and our manufacturing flexibility here. How do we get products out quickly with good standards and with high efficiency? So this is really about scaling and understanding the need to scale their impact with sometimes limited resources. On the right-hand side, you can actually see a snapshot of the platform they took, and they actually did theme this. So they were looking at 3D printing, robotics, virtual and augmented reality, 3 key horizons for the business. But again, focusing the crowd, having the global reach of the crowd, is something that changed the game for them. They'd been reliant upon one person going out, trying to understand the market, trying to understand the problem, when all of a sudden they now have thousands of eyeballs, thousands of brains telling them what the market problem might be, and also, most importantly, offering up a solution. That's the change. It's not just a problem, now we're getting to solution. If you can click to the next slide, please. So, Siemens Technology to Business Center. They were very, very happy, obviously, with the results, but the key thing that stood out for us was a quote from the center themselves, that the tech partners are now coming to them, and the tech pipeline is growing by itself organically through their partner engagement, through their B2B engagement. This public platform really has shifted the landscape for them. It's changed the landscape fundamentally. They're now in a scenario where they're able to do global tech scouting almost at the click of a button, and to save 2 weeks per quarter for their experts and executives in terms of appraising these ideas that are coming in. So 2 weeks per quarter, 8 weeks a year. That's a huge reduction in effort. It's also down to the automation of the system they're using. But most importantly, it's obviously not just about getting those ideas and reducing the time. What about the quality? They've seen quality improve, volume improve, and they've already got a pipeline of technology in place now to take away from the program to feed back into the program for future engagements. So this really is a 360-degree opportunity that Siemens have placed out there into the market to do the tech scouting, to improve their efficiency, and also, most importantly, to get to market quicker, to be the first to market, which is their ultimate goal. Okay, and next slide, please. So I wanted to share with you today a little bit about how I do it, how we do it here at Spigit. I come from a background where I was heavily involved at a large scale with an organization of 120,000 people. 30% of that organization was contact center based. And we rolled out a voice of the customer program through that contact center, bringing people who heard the problems day to day back into our viewpoint, our line of sight. And we were able to do dramatic things. We were able to shave time, days, weeks off customer journeys. We were able to eradicate £30 million worth of spending, all through this kind of program. Voice of the contact center, as we call it here at Spigit, is something we see time and again working for our customers. But what I've taken is the core points to that program, and we've put that in place now with our own customers here at Spigit, albeit not through a contact center. This is much more of an online engagement. But I've laid out in front of you here an example of how we think about the voice of the customer process in a B2B and B2C hybrid. So we structure quite clearly around time-bound challenges. We have a schedule and a roadmap for challenge launches that ties back to my roadmap and my strategy for our product. We engage key stakeholders internally at Spigit. We engage our customer advisory board to understand market problems and then to source solutions from the greater crowd, from the larger crowd. So once we've launched our challenge, we focus primarily around insight capture. So our capture forms are easy to understand. They focus on not just the problem, but also the solution. And we're constantly trying to message to the crowd that this is around capturing the outcome and potential solutions. This isn't just a one-way feedback channel. because using our own system with the crowd, we're able to then take the insights we've captured and turn them out for crowd collaboration. This is openly encouraged. We've seen this work time and time again, and in my own experience, as I was mentioning, we've really seen co-collaboration and co-foundation work brilliantly. To correct ideas, so maybe course correction is a real benefit from this, but also to validate ideas, to really verify the findings and to verify the data points we're seeing from maybe one customer, to see that ripple out across 3, 4, 5, 6, 20 customers. That's really where this starts to hit home. Once we've captured the insights, once we've been through crowd collaboration, we take those and we prioritize and select. And one of the things I love about the way we use our own platform out there with our clients is that we can run prioritization and selection differently. So we can take this as a mixed moderation approach where we may review, quantify the ideas for value, whereas at the same time we have the crowd expressing preference using some of our tools like pairwise or predictions. That model works really well because we have our own validation and we have a crowd validation. So if we're looking at bigger data, that's a point at which we can really hone in upon. On the flip side, and this again is the beauty of what we are doing, is we can turn this open, and we do in some of our challenges, to total crowd sentiment gather. So we go through insight capture, we go through crowd collaboration, and then we allow the crowd to tell us of all these insights, which are the most important. And we use some of our smart tools to do that, which allows us to scale this program up. From that point, though, because we have launched the challenge in close alignment with our roadmap and our product strategy, I'm able to take this and work with my internal teams to go down the concept development route. So release upon release here at Spigit, we're listening more and more to the voice of the customer. I think the stats particularly show that in our last release, 55% of our incremental improvements were sourced from the customer. They came from insights. They came from things that you're telling us if you are a customer Spigit on the webinar. The things that you've told us are important to you. And that's driven our roadmap, that's driven our decision making here at Spigit. So let's take a look at the actual portal we use. If we can click through to the next slide. So this is our customer success portal. This is our Spigit success portal. And you'll notice that down here on the left-hand side, if you do have access, you're able to participate in challenges. So being routed through to our focused, time-bound events. They're all in there, and we encourage you to partake. If you're not a customer Spigit, maybe this is a reason to become a customer. But from my point of view, having something that's open and transparent and allows co-collaboration has been proven time and time again to be successful. It's that hybrid model of B2C and B2B. We can even, as I've proven in the slides earlier on, go just down a B2B route. I think that really is where we can change the game. And let's just take a look at how this might work in action. So if we skip through to the next slide. On the left-hand side, you've got capturing ideas. So here's an idea that came through from one of our customers around the anonymous feature we have in our platform. On the right-hand side, we can see that the feature has gone through, the insight's been captured, and then we have co-collaboration taking place. So if we can just click the slide on, you'll notice then that we have the conversation start to grow. And this is the point that summarizes the whole webinar really for me. Gaining the insight is just the starting point. Being able to do things with the insight is where this can really change the game for you, whether that be co-collaboration, whether that be prioritization and selection, and having that transparency. This is really where I think there is ground to be made up, and there is certainly opportunity for you all as organizations. So let's take a look at some key takeaways from the webinar today, if we can click through. I think it's fair to say that VOC programs can move way beyond that one-way feedback channel. When you get into a two-way conversation, a co-collaboration channel, it really does help you solve the issues. Your end users, your crowd, they can see that you're listening. They can see the action, and that just fuels the program for the next engagement. For B2C, the voice of the contact center, the voice of the employee it can save you millions. The story I was sharing earlier on, £22 million in 1 year, an additional 8 million in a second year. It can even identify new revenue opportunities, things that you've not seen, but maybe that cross between the voice of the contact center and voice of the employee, just like AT&T, can really be a fillip for you to add to your portfolio. Also for B2C, you can engage your customers at scale. No longer is it one survey or a telephone call. This is about bringing more people to the problem, identifying it clearly, and then moving into solution mode quickly. Having more eyeballs and more brains. That's what we want you to be able to do. In a B2B scenario, it just has an equally large benefit. We just need to tap it. And that's something that I think you can take away, tapping into that entire employee base, as well as your partners, as well as your customers, as well as educational organizations. That is something that I would encourage you thoroughly to go out and do. And then finally, solution partners like us, ourselves at Spigit, well, we can help you through this. We can help you take a look at the program, and we can also provide you with the technology as well to drive this. So at this point, I think we'll open this up for questions. Hopefully there are some out there. I did see some coming through as we were talking.
So I encourage you to use the question box. Gareth, a question that came up earlier was particularly around the call center. There's a couple of areas of concern around call centers when it comes to A, taking them off the phones, how do you justify that, and B, how do you get them to participate, what kinds of incentives, just a lot of questions around actually working with the tactics behind engaging call centers into a program like this.
That's a really, really good question, Amy. Would it be okay if I use some of my own experience for that? Because I think it might help. Okay. So just the first part of that around the time management, if you like, and I'm realistic. As I said, I've worked in a contact center environment or an organization that's had a large contact center footprint. The time management part is actually not really a problem. Many of the contact center staff out there in your organizations are targeted and have KPIs around feeding things back into the organization. We actually adopted a time code just to ensure that we were kind of belt and braces, if you like, so that people felt comfortable taking that time to put that in place, to put the insights into the system. We also used an API approach to take a capture box from the screen and to push those insights into the Spigit platform at the time. So that's a nice quick way, low barrier to entry for those people to actually be able to get to a platform where they can then link to. So it would send them an email and they could come back. So I don't think the time element's really a problem. I don't see it as a problem. And if you are customer driven, it shouldn't even be a question. But in terms of engagement and how you sustain the engagement, we unfortunately, I couldn't give away prizes. My focus was more about fulfillment for those people who were participating. So in the scenario I was describing, we actually had one member of staff. It was a huge organization, and he worked in quite a rural part of the southwest UK. And he was in a contact center. He was a low grade, if you like, if I can use those terms. He was just a call handler. But he listened to each day hundreds of calls coming in, talking about the services that were being offered. And he started to put ideas into the system. He co-collaborated with other contact center employees across the UK. There's 450 plus offices out there in the UK for this organization, so a large footprint. And when we sat him down and we walked through his ideas, when a few of them have been successful and they've helped us save money, improve the customer journey, the thing that really changed it for us was we asked him what incentivized him, and his response was the ability to change lives for the people I deal with. That was his frustration. Now that sounds really great, and we were lucky to be working in an organization where people were motivated that way. But in terms of rewards, this can tie into existing reward schemes if you have them. If you're able to give away hard products, if you're able to incentivize people with experiences, these are all the kinds of things that will help you drive that voice of the customer, the voice of the contact center, back centrally to your organization. And that's a game changer, because these people speak to more than we could ever hope to. Does that answer the question, Amy, do you feel?
Yeah, another question, Gareth, that came in a minute ago was again about incentives, but this more related to customers and back to the B2C scenario. How do
Yep.
you engage customers into problem solving in B2C?
That's another great question. So in my experience, when I've seen organizations attempt this, there's been a few different ways, and depending upon the way you're engaging them with B2C, so if you're looking for new product ideas, for example, or if you're looking for improvements in the customer journey, it can change the way you actually look to incentivize them. So for products, it can be early access to the product, early access to the service. Having them brought in maybe to work with your teams as a kind of idea owner, an insight owner, to guide the path. That is something in today's world and in today's society is incredibly valuable. People take those experiences more than they would perhaps an iPad or a phone or something that's tangible. That goes beyond the transaction. That becomes an emotional connection to you and to your brand. If you're looking to break the chain with the B2C environment and the voice of the customer, I would really encourage you to look at a way to bring those people in who give you the most valuable insights, and to use a platform where you can actually understand who is contributing the most to the program. So I think yeah, clearly for me, it's around the experience, bringing them in, co-collaborating with them, and doing it with honesty and transparency. That's the way I would normally look to engage those customers.
So on the B2B side, you talked a lot about new product development, but are there other things that the voice of the customer is used for? I know because you're the head of product management, you think about product development, but have you seen in our customers different use cases other than product development for their voice of the customer programs?
Yeah, that's another good point, Amy. We've actually seen a myriad of different use cases, and we're lucky in that our platform can flex and bend to support them with a few simple clicks. Things like hackathons. We've seen people go out and do jams with partners in the B2B scenario. So looking at supply chain has been another one where they've clearly gone out with and this is from oil and gas, where they've clearly gone out with an idea in mind around improving the supply chain to ensure that quality at delivery is improved and is up, because that impacts everybody's bottom line. So we've seen that use case come through very strongly, the partner engagement. We've also interestingly seen with B2B a different kind of partner engagement, and this was something that came from aeronautical engineering, where the supplier engaged the organization, in this case an airline that they supplied to, and they offered the crowd for hire. And the result of that was the airline posed a series of questions to the internal crowd at this organization, and they posed questions from product related through to the journey through the airport, through to cooling the airplanes, things that organization would never supply normally and traditionally as a vendor. And that the improvement and the strength of the relationship that forged between the vendor and the company that they were supplying to is untold. The feedback was huge. It's gone all the way to the very top of the pyramid there. So the B2B scenario offers so many possibilities, from supplier engagement, from the supply chain, into hackathons, into crowds for hire, into standard kind of challenges and always-on approaches. There's so many options you have in B2B. I think it really is a landscape that needs to be sort of populated now by organizations, and also driven forward at the forefront or the spear of the program. I think voice of the customer is nice and clear, but it does take us down a path that's become almost singular to that VOC and the B2C environment.
Well, at this point, I think what I'd like to do is to thank everybody. I'll let you know that you will be receiving a copy of slides. If we did not get to your question, I promise we'll take it offline and follow up with you directly. And thank you, everybody, for your attention today. You'll receive a copy of the recording as well as a copy of the slides in your inbox in the next day or so. Gareth, thank you very much. Appreciate it. I actually learned a lot today. So everybody have a good rest of the day. Thank you.